Hello, everyone.
The applause from my students echoed throughout the lecture hall as I wrapped up my presentation on Mesopotamian excavations. Sharing my passion for archaeology with curious minds always gave me a boost. After the last student filed out, I gathered up my notes and made my way down the corridor of the Department of Archaeology and Museum Studies. Teaching here was as rewarding as leading digs around the world, but I cherished the balance I had finally found between the two. My wife, Lisa, is a psychologist with her own practice downtown. At 27, she has built a successful career helping her clients explore and understand their minds. After 5 years of marriage, we had learned to navigate my frequent absences, and I felt confident in the strength of our relationship. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa, reminding me to grab some groceries. I smiled, looking forward to the quiet evening we had planned, a simple dinner, a glass of wine, and a movie. These small comforts meant the world to me during my short spells at home. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed Lisa's car parked out front, and the warm glow from the living room lights greeted me as I walked in. The familiar smell of her cooking filled the air. "Hey, honey!" I called, setting my bag down in the kitchen. Her reply was tight, her voice sounding strained. I found her at the stove, stirring a pot with her back tense. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, but she immediately tensed, and I pulled away, concerned. "Everything okay?" I asked. She forced a small smile and replied, "Just a rough day at work." Dinner was unusually quiet, her distraction palpable. I tried to share some highlights from my day and talk about the upcoming trip to Turkey, but she remained distant, eventually excusing herself early, saying she was tired. I was left alone in the living room, wondering if maybe she had dealt with a particularly difficult client. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of lectures and preparations for my upcoming trip. But Lisa's strange behavior kept tugging at the back of my mind. She seemed preoccupied, her phone always close by, and she spent more time at her office than usual. One evening, as I was packing up my equipment, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, and I hesitated before answering. "Mr. Harlow?" a woman's voice asked. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I thought you should know something." She explained that she worked in the same building as Lisa and had often seen her meeting with a man, frequently late in the evenings. "I just thought you deserved to know," she finished, hanging up before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, stunned. Why would anyone want to prank me like this? Lisa and I had not been married that long, and I was only a few years older than her. The following morning, I noticed she had left her planner on the kitchen counter. Knowing how essential it was for her sessions, I decided to drop it off at her office. When I arrived, the building was oddly quiet, with a security guard stationed by the entrance. "Good morning," I greeted him, holding up the planner. "I just need to drop this off for my wife, Lisa Harlow. She works here." The guard gave me a strange look. "The building's closed for maintenance today," he said. "Closed?" I repeated, surprised. "But my wife is inside." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, she came in earlier with a man. Said she needed to fix some equipment, and he was here to help." My heart sank. "Could I go in and give this to her?" I asked. The guard shook his head. "Sorry, sir, only authorized personnel are allowed inside today." Desperate, I discreetly slipped him some cash. Glancing around, he pocketed it and said, "All right, but make it quick. They're probably up in her office on the 3rd floor." I thanked him and hurried inside. As I reached the 3rd floor, I began to hear noises, faint at first, but unmistakable sounds of pleasure, male and female voices together. My heart pounded, and my stomach twisted with dread. Moving forward as quietly as I could, I crept closer, hoping to stay unseen. When I reached Lisa's office door, the sounds grew louder, leaving no doubt about what was happening. I pushed the door open a crack, and the scene before me froze my blood. Lisa was on her knees in front of a man, her face smeared with a white substance. The man, someone I recognized from her photos of clients, looked down at her with a smug grin. Lisa gasped when she saw me, scrambling to cover herself, while the man just laughed, a sneer on his face. I stood there, paralyzed, as the planner slipped from my fingers to the floor. The man dressed quickly, still smirking. Husband, huh? You almost caught me, but I was faster, he mocked, swaggering out of the room with an air of arrogance. I barely managed to mutter, "Go to hell." He chuckled as he left, leaving Lisa and me in tense, suffocating silence. She was still too shocked to cover herself. I moved to a table, leaned heavily on it, and finally sank into a chair. "What the hell was that?" I asked, my voice hollow. Lisa finally moved, grabbing a few tissues to wipe her face, and began dressing without looking at me. "He's not just a client," she said softly. "He's an old friend. I have known him since we were kids. We dated when we were around 12 to 17, back when he was different." Her words felt like stabs. "So he was your first?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You told me you were a virgin when we met at 20. She sighed, pulling on her clothes. "I never thought he would come back into my life. Back then, he was just a shy, overweight kid, but now—" She trailed off, glancing at the door where he had left. "Now he's different, strong, good-looking. I just could not resist." I swallowed, my insides churning with anger and humiliation. "How many times could you not resist him?" I demanded. She looked away. "We have been meeting in secret for 2 months," she whispered, barely audible. "So all this time, you were lying to me, pretending I was the only one." She finally looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. "I thought it did not matter," she mumbled. "I thought he was out of my life for good. I never expected him to show up like this, looking the way he does. Like some fantasy prince, right?" I shot back, bitterness lacing my words. "And what about us? What about our marriage?" She took a deep breath, struggling to steady herself. "I did not plan for this to happen. It just did. When he came back, looking like he does now, it stirred up old feelings I thought were gone, things I did not realize I was missing." "Missing?" I echoed, hardly believing my ears. "So I am just some placeholder, something to pass the time while you chase thrills?" "It is not like that," she insisted weakly. "I love you, but with him, it feels different, intense. I cannot explain it." 2 months, I repeated, shaking my head. "And you never thought about stopping, about what this would do to me?" Her voice was barely a whisper as tears streaked down her face. "I did not want to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "But—" I just could not stop. I stood up, unable to bear the sight of her any longer. Part of me wanted to take off my glasses, blur out the image before me, and reduce this nightmare to nothing but a foggy outline. "I need some air," I muttered, heading for the door. But as I paused in the doorway, the full weight of what I had seen hit me. How could Lisa throw away everything we had built just because this guy now looked more appealing? Then, a realization crept in. My work, my expeditions, the constant lectures and travel had taken up so much of my time that I had neglected my own health. At 29, I had become quite ordinary in appearance, more focused on ancient ruins than on my physical well-being. Dining at the local diners or cafeteria had become my norm, and fitness had never been a priority. Lisa, now fully dressed, broke the silence. "I know you must hate me," she said softly. I said nothing, still reeling from the revelation. It was hard to comprehend that a physical attraction to this man had outweighed everything we had shared. My mind raced, sifting through our years together, searching for any signs of discontent I might have missed. After standing there, lost in thought for what felt like forever, I finally turned and walked out of her office. This was not how it was supposed to go, I muttered under my breath. The security guard at the entrance glanced at me as I left. "Did you help them fix the equipment or something?" he asked, oblivious to my inner turmoil. I gave him a crazed look, saying nothing, and he stared back, bewildered but silent. I reached my car, the weight of what had happened bearing down on me. As I started the engine, I was just about to pull away when I saw Lisa running toward me, waving her arms. She reached the car and knocked on the window, begging me to let her in. I hesitated, staring at her through the glass, trying to make sense of everything. Despite my anger, I unlocked the door. She climbed in, her breath shaky, tears streaming down her face. "Please, let us talk somewhere else," she pleaded. I stayed silent, still in shock, as we drove in intense, uncomfortable quiet. Finally, I broke the silence. "I am going to a bar," I said coldly. "You are not invited. You can walk if you want." Lisa began to protest. "Please, let us go home and talk this through," she begged. "Just leave me now." I cut her off, my voice like ice. She fell silent, her face a mix of regret and pain. When we reached an intersection, I pulled over, and she reluctantly got out, her tears still streaming. I watched her walk away before heading to a bar where I often met up with my expedition colleagues. The camaraderie and memories of adventure with my team came flooding back as I stepped inside. I remembered that in just a few days, I had an expedition to Turkey to prepare for. Sitting at the counter, I intended to order a beer, but when the bartender approached, I felt something stop me. "A glass of water, please," I said. The bartender raised an eyebrow, surprised but said nothing, handing me the water. I drank it down, but it did little to ease the turmoil within me. I sat there, lost in thought, staring at the counter. Suddenly, a familiar voice interrupted my reverie. "Hey, what are you doing here, man?" I turned to see Fred, one of my expedition buddies, standing beside me, looking concerned. Fred, always the calm and level-headed one, had returned to town before our trip and now looked at me, clearly sensing something was off. "Fred," I said, managing a weak smile. Fred frowned. "You do not look like yourself." I took a deep breath, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "My wife, she is with another guy. Apparently, this guy has a whole lineup of women, but she does not see it. She thinks he is devoted only to her. It makes me sick." Fred scratched his head, looking thoughtful. "That is rough, man. I cannot say I know how it feels. I never got married, and I do not regret it. I am 3 years older than you, live for myself, and answer to nobody. I do not have to spend money on anyone else, not on a kid, not on a wife. Everything I earn I keep. It is a good life." I gave a bitter chuckle. "Maybe you are right," I muttered. "It is just hard." Fred patted my shoulder. "Focus on what matters to you. We have got this expedition coming up. Do not let this mess with your head." I nodded, absorbing his blunt wisdom. "Yeah, I know." Fred grinned. "Good. Do not let this whole mess ruin your focus or your luck out in Turkey. We need you sharp out there." After spending a while talking with Fred, I felt a bit more grounded. We discussed the expedition, the sites we were eager to explore, and the potential finds awaiting us. His no-nonsense approach and our shared passion for archaeology helped me regain some clarity. I thanked him and decided it was time to go home. "Take care, man," Fred said, giving me a firm handshake. "And remember, do not let her mess with your head." "I will not," I promised, feeling a spark of resolve as I left the bar. The cool night air cleared my mind a little more. As I drove home, the streets were quiet, the city lights casting a soft glow. When I finally reached our house, everything seemed eerily still. I stepped inside, expecting silence, but I heard faint sounds of movement. My heart skipped a beat. Lisa? What was she doing back so soon? I walked toward the living room and froze. There she was, frantically packing a suitcase, clothes scattered everywhere. She was so focused on her task that she did not notice me at first, her face blotchy with tears. "Lisa?" I called, my voice a mix of confusion and concern. She jumped, turning around startled. "Oh, you are back," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought you would stay at the bar longer." "What are you doing?" I asked, eyeing the suitcase. She wiped her eyes. I cannot stay here. Not after everything." "Running away?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "That is your solution," She shook her head. It is not like that. I need space. Time to think. To think about what? I demanded, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. About him. Tears streamed down her face, and she whispered, I am sorry. I never intended for things to go this far, but now everything is such a mess, and I have no idea what to do. Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. Just as I was about to respond, the doorbell rang, interrupting the heavy silence between us. We both froze, exchanging a look of confusion. Who would show up at this hour? I walked to the door and opened it, revealing a woman I did not recognize. She held a small child in her arms, no older than 2, who was softly crying. The woman's face was etched with distress and fatigue. Can I help you? I asked, bewildered. Taking a deep breath, she spoke. I am sorry for coming here like this, but I need to speak with Lisa. It is about the man she's been seeing. He is my husband. Her words hit like a sledgehammer. Behind me, I heard Lisa's sharp intake of breath, and when I glanced back, her face had gone pale. The woman continued, I found your address in his phone. I did not know where else to go. He's not the man he pretends to be, and I thought you should know the truth. I stepped aside, allowing her and the child inside. Lisa looked as shocked as I felt, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. The woman sat down, calming her child, then turned her gaze to Lisa. He's been lying to both of us. I discovered he's been seeing multiple women, not just you. Lisa looked away, guilt written all over her face. I knew I was not the only one, she admitted quietly. But his charm, his looks, he made me feel things I had not felt in years. I turned to the woman, keeping my voice steady. What do you want from us? She exhaled heavily. I just wanted to warn you. He is manipulative, dangerous. He uses women and then discards them. I do not want anyone else to go through what I have. Lisa seemed to sink further into herself, shame in every line of her face. I am sorry, she whispered, though her apology sounded empty. I looked back at the woman, who was now comforting her child. Thank you for telling us. But to be honest, I do not want to get further involved in this. The woman nodded, understanding. I get it. I just needed to tell you, for your own safety and hers. She looked at Lisa as she spoke. As she turned to leave, Lisa spoke up, her voice small. Thank you? I'm sorry for everything. After the woman left, I turned back to Lisa, feeling the weight of betrayal all over again. Lisa, you need to handle this yourself. I can't be a part of it anymore. I need to focus on my work. My expedition is all that's keeping me grounded right now. Lisa nodded, tears slipping down her face. I understand. I'll deal with it. With that, I sank onto the couch, flipping on the television, hoping to numb my mind before the expedition. The day of the trip finally arrived. As I loaded my suitcases into the car, I felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. Lisa stood by the door, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. I love you, she said softly. I looked at her, my gaze cold. If that were true, you wouldn't have done this. Just try to stay out of trouble with him, at least while I'm still your husband. Her face crumpled, but I turned away, climbed into the car, and drove off without waiting for a response. The airport, with its constant activity, was the first place I could finally breathe. At the terminal, a few members of the expedition team were already waiting, though I soon learned our flight was delayed by several hours. Frustration welled up within me. All I wanted was to put as much distance as possible between myself and the chaos back home. Fred arrived shortly after, and we exchanged a nod, sitting together in silence until he finally spoke. So, are you going to divorce her? He asked bluntly. It looks that way, I replied, bitterness lacing my voice. Turns out she knew perfectly well she was not the only one. The guy has other women besides her. Fred shrugged, unfazed. That's how things go. I'm glad I chose a different life, no one else's problems to deal with. I nodded, appreciating his straightforward approach, even if I could not fully embrace it. The delay felt endless, but finally, the boarding announcement came, and we gathered our things to head to the gate. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window, watching the city disappear below. The long flight to Istanbul gave me plenty of time to think, though I eventually managed to shut down my thoughts. After several hours, we finally landed in Istanbul, where we had a short layover before catching a connecting flight to Antakya, near the ancient city of Antioch. Istanbul's airport was bustling, filled with tourists and locals. Our team regrouped at the gate for our next flight, excitement building as this was a rare opportunity to uncover ancient secrets. The second leg of the journey was on a smaller plane, with nearly all seats occupied by members of our expedition, creating a close, almost familial atmosphere. The short flight to Antakya provided breathtaking views of Turkey's rugged landscapes and ancient ruins scattered below. Upon landing, we were greeted by the warm, dry air of the Mediterranean region. Antakya's charm was undeniable, with narrow streets, historical buildings, and the distant sounds of a bustling market. Despite its beauty, our minds were focused on the dig site, a location that held promise of invaluable artifacts from ancient times. We checked into a modest hotel, which would serve as our base for the expedition. The view from my room overlooked the rugged countryside, stretching toward the mountains. After settling in, the team gathered in the dining area for a quick meeting. "Welcome to Antakya." Dr. Kaplan, our lead archaeologist, greeted us. "There's a lot of work ahead, but I am confident that this site will reveal some remarkable finds. Get some rest tonight, and we'll start fresh in the morning." Some of the team wandered off to explore the town, while others headed to their rooms. I found myself wandering the streets, trying to absorb the beauty around me. Despite everything I had left behind, a sense of calm started to settle over me. The next morning, we gathered at dawn, the air buzzing with excitement. We piled into a few vans and headed out to the dig site, located on the outskirts of the city. The site was a large field marked by remnants of ancient structures jutting from the earth. Dr. Kaplan gave us an overview of the day's plan, and we quickly got to work, sifting through soil and documenting every artifact we found. As the sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the site, hours slipped by as we worked, each small discovery bringing a thrill of excitement. The rhythm of digging and documenting was exactly the distraction I needed. During a break, Fred approached me, handing over a canteen of water. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his tone unusually gentle. "I am doing all right," I replied, taking a sip. This was exactly what I needed. "Thanks for being there the other night." He nodded. "Good to hear." As the days passed, we settled into a steady routine: early mornings, long days at the site, evenings filled with shared stories over dinner. Each day, new artifacts emerged, small but significant pieces adding to the puzzle of the ancient world. The camaraderie among our team grew with each discovery, the shared passion binding us together. One evening, after a particularly successful day, we gathered on the hotel's terrace overlooking the mountains. The setting sun cast shades of orange and pink across the sky, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. I felt a deep sense of contentment as we worked on the ruins in Antakya. The ancient site was revealing its secrets to us, and in a way, it was helping me piece together my own sense of self again. Fred raised his glass, a glint of humor in his eyes. "To new beginnings and ancient discoveries," he toasted. We all raised our glasses, our voices joining in agreement. The excavation continued at a steady pace, each day bringing new fragments of history buried beneath Turkey's rich soil. Our dig site was just outside the largest town in the region, a charming blend of historic stone buildings, narrow alleys, and vibrant markets. The town offered a pleasant escape during our breaks, a stark contrast to the intense focus of the excavation. One afternoon, I took a walk through the bustling streets, soaking in the sights and sounds. The narrow lanes were alive with vendors selling fresh produce, tourists admiring the architecture, and conversations in various languages floating through the air. As I strolled, my phone rang. I glanced down to see Lisa's name. My heart sank a little, but I answered. "Hello?" "Hi. she replied, her voice hesitant. How's the expedition going? It's going well, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Did you leave? No, she admitted. That conversation with the woman and her child made me think. I realized I need to sort things out here. I wanted to say something, to tell her exactly how I felt, but I held back. I did not want to ruin the expedition with more conflict. Goodbye, Lisa, I said simply. She sighed. Goodbye. I hung up and continued my walk, trying to let the town's beauty distract me. As I wandered past cafes and small shops, I eventually found my way to the shoreline. The sea was calm, but a few cruise ships in the distance sent waves crashing to the shore. A group of sunbathers, caught off guard by the powerful waves, scrambled to gather their belongings as they were swept by the water. Laughter and shouts filled the air as they chased after their things, some playfully trying to tackle the waves. I found a bench overlooking the water and sat down, watching the chaos with a faint smile. It reminded me of how unpredictable life could be. As the days went on, each brought fresh discoveries. We uncovered fragments of pottery, tools, and even remnants of ancient structures. One evening, as we gathered around the dinner table at our hotel, Dr. Kaplan shared some exciting news. We've identified several artifacts that indicate this site was a significant trading hub in ancient times, he announced, his face alight with enthusiasm. The table buzzed with excitement, and everyone was eager to get back to work. As the conversation shifted to the next day's plans, I found myself gazing out over the landscape. This expedition was more than just a professional achievement for me. It was a sanctuary from the turmoil of my personal life. Each day spent digging, discovering, and learning felt like a step toward healing. The ancient ruins, combined with Turkey's natural beauty, were helping me rebuild parts of myself that had been shattered. The sun set over the town, casting a warm glow across the ruins, the mountains, and the sea. I felt a sense of peace, as if I were finally beginning to understand something larger about life. A few days into the dig, some team members fell ill and had to stay back at the hotel, which left us short-staffed. But those of us who could still work carried on with determination. One morning, as we continued our excavation, Sophia, one of the newer archaeologists, unearthed something remarkable. She carefully brushed away the dirt to reveal a set of intricately designed artifacts. Word spread quickly, and soon everyone gathered to inspect the find. The artifacts were unlike anything we had seen before, beautifully crafted pieces that hinted at historical importance. There were ornate vases, delicately carved figurines, and a mysterious bronze disc covered in unfamiliar symbols. We decided to keep the discovery under wraps until the end of the expedition, unsure of the artifact's exact value. Dr. Kaplan led the team in carefully cataloging and securing the items, ensuring their safety. Over the next few days, we uncovered even more pieces, adding to our growing collection of treasures. Despite our reduced team, everyone's dedication never wavered. Back in Istanbul, we headed straight to the Cultural Heritage Center to meet with the experts. The anticipation was palpable as we presented our findings. Dr. Leos, the head curator, examined the artifacts with great interest. "This is incredible," he murmured, carefully inspecting the bronze disc. "These artifacts likely come from a very ancient period, possibly predating even the classical era of Anatolian history. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, and their preservation is remarkable." He looked up, visibly impressed. "We would be willing to offer a significant sum for these artifacts. Their historical value is immense." The Cultural Center proposed purchasing the entire collection, ensuring it would be preserved and studied by experts. Later that evening, as we celebrated at a nearby tavern, Fred raised his glass once more. To a successful expedition and the incredible discoveries we made. We all clinked our glasses, the camaraderie and shared sense of achievement filling the room. As I sipped my drink, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The ruins of Antakya had given me more than just professional success. They had offered me a refuge, a place to heal and rediscover my passion. The next day, we visited the Cultural Center one last time. The artifacts were now part of their prestigious collection, displayed prominently for scholars and visitors to admire. Realizing that our work would be appreciated by so many was humbling. With the ancient treasures safely preserved, we prepared to leave Istanbul and head back home. The expedition had been a transformative experience, helping me move past the personal betrayals and focus on the things that truly mattered. I felt certain that our work would leave a lasting legacy for future generations. 3 weeks had passed since I had left for the expedition, and as our plane touched down, a bittersweet feeling washed over me. The dig had been a sanctuary from my personal chaos, but now it was time to face reality again. We gathered our belongings and made our way through the terminal, exchanging hugs and contact information, promising to stay in touch. We even planned a reunion soon to celebrate at the same bar where Fred and I had met before we left. On the plane ride back, Fred turned to me, cutting through the cabin noise with his usual bluntness. "So, are you really going to divorce her?" I took a deep breath, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past few weeks. "This trip gave me hope that maybe not everything is lost between us," I replied. Fred raised an eyebrow, a skeptical look crossing his face. "I doubt it. One of the golden rules for men is never to go back to a woman who cheated. But somehow, everyone thinks their case is unique." As we arrived back home, the team gathered one last time to say goodbye. There was a mix of excitement and reluctance to part ways, but everyone was eager to return to their families and share their stories. "Take care, man," Fred said, giving me a firm handshake. "And remember what I told you." "Thanks, Fred," I replied, grateful for his steady presence. "I will," I replied, genuinely appreciating Fred's bluntness, even if I was not quite ready to embrace it entirely. We all said our farewells, promising to keep in touch and meet up soon. I caught a cab and headed home, watching the familiar cityscape pass by in a blur. When I arrived home, I was taken aback by how spotless everything was. The house gleamed, with every surface polished to perfection. Lisa had clearly put in a lot of effort to welcome me back. As I stepped inside, the warm aroma of my favorite dinner filled the air. Lisa emerged from the kitchen, looking radiant, a stark contrast to the last time I saw her when she was teary-eyed. At first, it felt surreal, almost too perfect, but seeing the lengths she had gone to make our home feel welcoming made me believe that, like me, she was ready to move past the unpleasantness in our lives. "Welcome home," she said softly, a hopeful smile gracing her face. "It's good to be home," I replied, trying to match her warmth. We sat down to eat, and the meal she had prepared was perfect. As we ate, I began sharing stories about my travels, and Lisa listened closely, her eyes bright with interest. "You look so much better," she remarked, noticing the slight change in my appearance. I chuckled, patting my slightly leaner stomach. "Well, all that walking and crawling around during the excavations helped me lose a bit of weight." "You look great," she said sincerely. "I've missed you." I looked at her and saw the genuine affection in her eyes. "You look amazing too, better than when I left." For a moment, it felt like we were back in those happier days before I knew about her affair. The connection we shared over dinner reminded me of better times. We talked about the expedition, the artifacts, and what the future might hold, without any of the tension that had plagued us before. After lunch, we decided to go for a walk together. The air was crisp, and we strolled hand in hand through the neighborhood, talking about everything and nothing, just enjoying each other's company. It felt like we had, even if just for the moment, moved past what had happened. When we got home, the mood was light and warm as we prepared for bed, sharing laughter and tender moments. It felt like the distance and strain from the past few weeks had melted away. As we climbed into bed, it was clear we both missed the closeness we once had, and soon, our passion reignited. As Lisa lay beside me, her eyes met mine, and I could not help but ask, "So, did you stop seeing that guy?" She looked into my eyes, nodding. "Yes, of course. I haven't seen him since. He asked me out a few times, but I turned him down." She leaned forward, kissing me and hugging me tightly. A wave of relief washed over me, and we continued to reconnect, feeling a renewed sense of closeness and joy. For that night, it felt as though everything was finally falling back into place. In the morning, Lisa was already gone by the time I woke up, back to her early routine at her psychology practice. I decided to make good use of my time and called the institute, arranging to give lectures about the recent excavations in a few days. We also agreed to hold a celebration with the team at the bar in a couple of days to commemorate the successful expedition. After confirming the details over the phone, I sat down to have breakfast. Just as I was about to take my first bite, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The message read, "Hello, you don't know me, but your wife does. I'm a mutual friend, so to speak." Confused and a bit uneasy, I replied, "Who are you, and what do you want?" "My name is Emma. Like your wife, I've been dating that pumped-up guy," came the response. A surge of panic went through me. I quickly typed, "She is no longer with him." "What are you even talking about?" Emma replied, "I don't want to bother you if you're busy. Let's meet in the park. I'll tell you everything I think you need to know." "Why should I believe you?" I asked, skepticism evident in my message. "I work in the same building as your wife. I was the one who told you I saw her with that man. I had to change my number, so you couldn't find me before," she explained. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. This was the same woman who had warned me previously. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet her. We set a time for 40 minutes from now at the nearby park. It was only a short walk, and as I arrived, I looked around, searching for Emma. Soon, I spotted a young woman, probably in her early 20s, sitting on a bench. She noticed me approaching and stood up. "It's me, Emma," she said. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of dread and curiosity. "So, what did you want to tell me?" She took a deep breath and began. "Basically, I've been dating this guy too, just like your wife. We only ever met alone, just me and him, or him with some other woman. I don't know exactly how many women he has, but one day, he apparently got bored of the usual dating. He decided to throw, let's say, a party at his place, and he invited all of us over." My jaw dropped. "Who was there? What happened next?" Emma continued. "Besides him, there were 4 of us. Me, another girl around my age, another who was a bit older, about 23, and the 4th was your wife." I was stunned into silence as she went on. "I don't think you want the details of how we spent time together, but let's just say we weren't playing board games or watching movies. It was 2 days ago." I struggled to process this. "How long did all of this last?" I finally managed to ask. Emma paused, then replied, "About 7 hours, from around 4 in the afternoon to 11 at night. We took breaks, talked a bit, and sometimes he focused on one of us, sometimes on all of us. And honestly, it seemed like your wife was enjoying herself the most." I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes, muttering, "You're all just—" I stopped myself, then corrected. "Well, my wife definitely is." Emma stayed silent for a moment, then added, "Afterward, I talked to the other girls. Those of us around my age, we aren't married, and we're not in serious relationships. Unlike your wife, we don't have anything tying us down. I thought you deserved to know the truth." I stopped rubbing my eyes, put my glasses back on, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for being honest and telling me straight." "You're welcome," she replied. "I think that's all I needed to say." She stood up, gave me a small nod, and walked away, leaving me alone on the bench to absorb everything. As I sat there, trying to process the bombshell she had dropped, my phone rang. It was Fred. "Hey, we decided to move our celebration to tonight. It's more convenient for most people." "You in?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Yeah, of course, I'll come. How could I not?" "Great. Oh, by the way, our shares from the sale of the artifacts will be deposited soon. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the amount. See you tonight." "Thanks, Fred. See you tonight." I ended the call and put my phone away, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. The news about the salary was a small bright spot in an otherwise bleak day. With several hours to pass before the celebration, I wandered around the park, aimlessly walking the streets, trying to clear my mind. Eventually, evening arrived, and I made my way to the bar, hoping that the camaraderie of my team would offer some much-needed distraction. I made my way to the bar, where the expedition team had already gathered, the place alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the buzz of a successful mission. My colleagues were in high spirits, drinking and celebrating our recent achievements. I joined them, trying my best to immerse myself in the festivities and push aside the chaos of my personal life. Fred handed me a drink, grinning. "Glad you made it, man! Let's toast to our achievements and all the good times ahead." As the night wore on, Fred must have noticed my distracted expression. "Hey, you look like a zombie. Didn't get enough rest after yesterday?" I could not hold it in any longer. The weight of everything was crushing me, and I needed to confide in someone. "Fred, I have to tell you something. When I got home, everything was perfect. The house was spotless, Lisa made my favorite dinner, and we even went for a walk. We reconnected, and she assured me she hadn't seen that guy again. She said he had asked her out, but she refused, telling me she's only mine now." Fred raised an eyebrow, listening as I went on. "But today, I met this girl, Emma, in the park. She told me about a party at that guy's place, with 3 other girls there, including Lisa. It happened the day before I got back. Emma said they weren't exactly watching movies or playing board games." Fred shook his head, a short laugh escaping him. "You're kidding me, right? You're living in some fairy tale if you believe she's only yours. Do you really think she doesn't get her satisfaction on the side? The golden rule for men never fails. Not following it is disrespecting yourself." I wanted to argue, to defend Lisa, but my mind felt foggy. I could not shake the knot in my gut. Fred gave me a pat on the back and headed off to join the others, who were still caught up in the excitement of the night. I stayed there, making half-hearted attempts to enjoy myself. I even managed to laugh at a few jokes, but the dark cloud hanging over me never fully lifted. Late in the evening, we all said our goodbyes and went our separate ways. Checking my phone, I saw that the payment from the expedition had come through. The amount was impressive, enough to allow me to take a break from work if I needed it. Returning home quietly, I found Lisa already asleep in bed. I changed clothes and slipped in beside her, making sure not to wake her. As I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, Fred's words echoed in my mind, cutting through the silence. The next morning, I woke feeling groggy and unrested, the short night leaving me drained. My whole body ached, and my mind was clouded with fatigue. Lisa was already up, putting the final touches on her lunch, and had breakfast waiting for me in the kitchen. I shuffled in, still half asleep. "Hello, darling," she greeted me brightly, noticing my tired state. "I can tell you had fun last night. I'm proud of you for handling such a successful expedition. You deserve the rest." I had no strength to resist as she came over and kissed me on the cheek. I forced a smile, unable to find any genuine feeling to return. "I love you," she said, her eyes searching mine, looking for a sign that the man she thought she knew was still there. I nodded, too drained to speak, and sat down at the table. She placed a plate of breakfast in front of me, but the food tasted like cardboard, and I quickly abandoned the pretense of eating. Lisa gave me one last look, a hint of concern flickering across her face, but she said nothing. With a final smile, she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "Have a good day," she called as she left. The door clicked shut, leaving me in the quiet stillness of the kitchen, staring at the untouched plate of food, lost in my own thoughts. As I sat there in the silence, staring at the untouched breakfast, a feeling of resolve began to form within me. For too long, I had been the one bending over backward, trying to ignore the signs, hoping Lisa would come around and realize the damage she had caused. But Fred's words kept echoing in my mind. The golden rule for men never fails. Not following it is disrespecting yourself. I had respected her, trusted her, and worked to forgive, but it was clear now that she had taken advantage of that trust. I felt a wave of indignation. This time, I would not be the naive one. I needed answers, and I needed them now. My phone was still on the table, and I picked it up, scrolling through old messages. Lisa had always kept her phone close, even when she claimed things were over with him. But I knew there were other ways to get to the truth. The first step was to check if she had kept anything on our shared laptop. After all, people sometimes left traces without realizing it. Opening the laptop, I searched through the usual places. Nothing at first, but as I went into the browser history, something unusual caught my eye. She had looked up the address of a high-end apartment complex downtown just a few days before I returned from the expedition. I knew she had no reason to be there for work or friends, and my mind began racing with questions. I decided to take a drive over to the apartment complex. I wanted to see if I could find anything that would give me a clearer picture. It was a short trip, and as I pulled into the parking lot, I felt a surge of adrenaline. There was no guarantee I would find anything, but I needed to feel like I was taking action. Inside the lobby, I approached the concierge, keeping my tone casual. "Hey, I'm meeting someone here but forgot which apartment he lives in. I think his name is Daniel? Tall, muscular guy." The concierge's face lit up in recognition. Mr. Daniels, of course. Apartment 17C. He's a familiar face around here, very friendly with a few guests." He raised an eyebrow, giving me a knowing look. "Right. Thanks," I replied, suppressing a grimace. It was him. Standing outside 17C, I debated what to do. I had no reason to believe he would actually be here right now, and I was in no mood to cause a scene. But something compelled me to knock, just in case. I rapped on the door, and after a pause, the door opened a crack. Daniel stood there, looking as smug as ever. His eyes widened slightly when he recognized me, but his smirk didn't falter. "Well, look who it is. Thought you'd be out at work, my man." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my anger in check. "Funny seeing you here. I just came by to thank you for the entertainment you provided my wife." His smile faltered for a split second, then returned, more arrogant than before. "Hey man, she came to me. You think you can keep someone like that satisfied? You're barely home." My patience snapped. "Maybe not, but unlike you, I've got more going for me than a string of women you juggle like trophies." He laughed, a condescending sound that grated on my nerves. "Keep telling yourself that. But hey, no hard feelings, right? She's just one of many." He made a dismissive gesture, and for a second, I considered punching him, but I knew better than to stoop to his level. "Good luck with that," I said coldly, turning on my heel. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was time to gather the pieces, not for her, but for myself. Returning home, I began collecting everything that mattered to me. I found our wedding album, tucked away and covered with dust. I couldn't bear to look at it, knowing what I knew now. Instead, I packed it away, along with other memories I no longer wanted to keep. Over the next few days, I went through our finances, speaking to a lawyer and quietly preparing for the end. I made sure that I had everything in order before Lisa noticed anything. But I wasn't finished yet. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her choices. Finally, on a Saturday morning, I decided to confront her, once and for all. She had no idea what was coming. She was in the kitchen, making coffee, her face bright as she greeted me. "Good morning! I thought we could spend the day together, maybe go out to lunch." I looked at her, keeping my face calm. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something." I motioned for her to sit, and she looked a little taken aback by my tone but complied. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice a little too cheerful. I took a deep breath. "I know about you and Daniel. I know about the party. I know everything." The color drained from her face. What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the apartment, the lies, and all the things you thought you could hide. I even spoke to someone who was at the party with you." I watched her squirm, the truth finally catching up to her. She stammered, trying to regain her composure. I don't know what you're talking about. You must have misunderstood something." "Misunderstood?" I scoffed. "No, Lisa. I've been more than understanding. I've been loyal. But you threw all of that away." Realizing she had no way out, her tone shifted, becoming defensive. Well, maybe if you were around more, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. You're always off on some expedition, leaving me alone. I shook my head, disgusted by her deflection. So that's your excuse? Because I was working to build a life for us, that justifies everything you've done. She fell silent, unable to look me in the eye. I stood up, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I'm done, Lisa. I'm moving out. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You can stay here, keep your secrets, and deal with the fallout yourself. I'm not sticking around to be played for a fool. Her face crumpled, but I had no sympathy left to give. I turned and walked out the door, leaving her to the life she had chosen. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I was free from the lies, and I could finally move forward on my own terms.
What do you think about this story? Write in comments. If you don't follow our channel Cheating Room, you will probably never hear from us again. If you are subscribed, congratulations, you will not miss any exciting story. Thank you for listening to this shocking story with us. See you again.
Bye bye.